Okay, this is the second video standing with Barth, responding with Barth to the challenges that biblical studies or biblical scholars might pose when reading his Romans commentary. I'm obviously not at home, I'm away with work this weekend, so I'm doing the best I can with the laptop. But this second part is going to be exploring matters of exegesis. In the previous one we looked at matters of style, in which I hoped to persuade my audience that Barth stands in a much older tradition than biblical scholarship, without wanting to jettison the work of contemporary biblical scholarship. His work can't be dismissed as commentary on the basis of stylistic factors, however. Turning to matters of exegesis, however, we need to deal with interpretive claims in the Romans commentary that seem just downright dodgy. This is beyond mere style, and we outlined a few of those in that video where we were summarizing, up to 20 problems, potential problems with Bart's commentary on chapters 8 to 16. What I want to do at the beginning is to linger a little bit on his account of Romans 9 to 11 before discussing others. In fact, I was going to spend my paper at Princeton, I was going to devote it to the questions raised by his exegesis of Romans 9 to 11, and I thought I developed quite an interesting and unique and original defense of Bart's approach, but Beverly Gaventa, much to my chagrin, thoroughly stole my thunder with her brilliant recent paper at the annual Karl Barth conference, which you can find on YouTube as well. In fact, I'll try and provide a link to that. But let's just ponder. Barth's term switching looks really suspect. Israel is the church, and sometimes Israel too, while the Gentiles are the unchurched. Isn't this supersessionism? The Paul within Judaism movement seeks earnestly to resist such evils and maintain, and here I quote Brian Tucker's recent volume, Reading Romans After Supersessionism, they seek to maintain, quote, the irrevocability of God's covenant with the Jewish people and a continuing role for Torah as a demarcator for the Jewish people and their identity. So on the one hand we've got the irrevocability of God's covenant, together with a continuing role for Torah in identity. Now identity is of course a hot topic, and I am not about to go wading into all of that, but the question is not Barth erasing Jewish identity with his term switching? With Gaventa, we can see Barth's move as consistent with his entire project, and that in itself doesn't justify it, of course, but allow me to unpack the argument. Barth's move in Romans 9 to 11 is consistent with what he does, at least in the second edition, with what he does in Romans chapters 1 to 7. He argues that God is known through God. Not a phrase, incidentally, that is found in the commentary, but it's often used and is useful. So God is known through God as the unknown God, revealed in his resurrection, intuitable only in the cross of Christ, the place of the negation of all human possibilities. As such, revelation remains out of the hands of human management. And this is it's not easy to summarize his commentary on Romans chapter 1 to 7, but that's a key thread of what is going on. Anyway, it follows from this, then, that there is no soteriologically significant distinction amongst humans. No symbolic capital based on human identity, to use John Barclay's language. Remember, the revelation of God remains out of the hands of human management for Barth. And Barth readily admits that there may be distinctions within time as well as amongst humans. But this is the key. Those distinctions amongst humans are not soteriologically significant, and in this sense they are trivial, to use Bart's language. There is no soteriological superiority immanent to humans as humans. Salvation, and by the way it is salvation, contra Alistair McGrath's critique, which I canvassed in that video when we were looking at problems with Bart's commentary. Salvation is miracle alone, for God is God, which means this: allein durch den Glauben bin ich, was ich nicht bin, or alone through faith, I am what I am not. And I think with this, Barth captures Paul's own relativizing, and I'm using Bart's word there as well, relativizing. Barth captures Paul's own relativizing of all human identities in light of Christ. In other words, relativizing means that they're not abolished, but they're relativized soteriologically. So, this is Paul in Galatians 3. There is no longer Jew or Greek. There is no longer slave or free. There is no longer male and female, for all of you are one in Christ Jesus. Or Colossians 3. In the renewal, there is no distinction between Greek and Jew, circumcised and uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave and free man, but Christ is all and in all. And this is Bart's frame for his reading of Romans 9 to 11. And it makes sense of his attempt to undermine any soteriological confidence church folk, Israel, whoever, might claim in and of themselves. I don't see in principle why this is incompatible with the irrevocability of God's covenant with the Jewish people, nor the continuing role of Torah for their identity. Other problems may remain, but I don't see why that is those issues are necessarily deleted. And Bart's focus on Christ in this logic, and this is to move into another area of exegetical contention. Bart's focus on Christ in this logic, on the death of Christ as the death of all, and the resurrection as life for all. And this is, 2 Corinthians 5:14 to 15, Romans 4:25, or 5:18, or famously Romans 11:32, and so on. Offers Bart's reading of vessels of wrath and mercy deep coherence. I think Bart's reading of the 7,000 is less opposed to the plain meaning of the text than he suspected. The number is symbolic in Second Temple Judaism. Perhaps speaking, have a look at Dunn's commentary on this, perhaps speaks of apocalyptic wholeness. Further, the section leads to the astonishing claim in 1132 that God may have mercy on all, a verse Barth rightly saw as crucial. But on this, I refer to the forthcoming work of Thomas Dixon, who wrote his PhD at Princeton, and the book shouldn't be too long before it hits the shelves. Do keep his name in mind. But there is more. For this soteriological levelling out of all humanity in light of the godness of God is, I suggest, a golden thread throughout Bart's commentary on Romans 8 to 16. He consistently attempts to break down divisive distinctions and emphasize human solidarity. We see this throughout his account of positive and negative ethics, as well as in both the great negative and positive possibilities. It likewise grounds his meditation on the dissolution of Paulinism in his section, The Crisis of Human Freedom. It's a wonderful section. And as I've suggested, this is what is behind his reading of Romans 9 to 11. And I think in our divided socio-political landscapes, these are tremendously helpful and redemptive themes. Now, certainly Bart's rhetoric concerning the Torah in terms of self-righteousness and legalism is problematic if we take Paul to be speaking about the Jewish pattern of religion, or some such. But the interpretive result of Bart's rhetoric is perhaps less problematic if we see in Paul's language a different target, either Gentile Christians who are seeking to adopt Jewish law, as some say, or Jewish Christian counter-missionaries, as others maintain. Paul is not, therefore, speaking about Judaism as a religion, but rather a particular Christian take on Gentile salvation that has mishandled the Torah. Now, admittedly, this all needs to be worked out exegetically in terms of Romans 9 to 11, but either way, Barth and contemporary biblical scholarship have here overlapping interests. Barth exegetes Romans 9 to 11 with reference to Israel elsewhere, and famously, of course, in the Church Dogmatics. But these earlier efforts of Barth, capsulated in the Romans commentary, capture something of Paul's spirit. And, of course, Barth applies this pastorally to his own situation. He is placing, in other words, his hearers among Paul's addressees. And this raises wider issues. To what extent we can do that, which I'll cover and think about in the next video.